Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining. I'm thrilled to see a nice big crowd here, and particularly the reason I'm so happy about this is because I love this topic. Sales pipeline management. I'll tell you a little bit more about our company in a second, but we do a lot with sales management. We think a lot about sales management issues like forecasting, pipeline management, coaching, CRM, data. And I just really love this topic because pipeline management matters. And I can say that confidently that this is something that truly, truly will move the needle. Let me share a little bit of research with you just to get the pump primed here. Actually, I'm going to share a lot of research. If you don't like research, you might want to run for the doors right now. This is going to be a very hostile environment for you. So we did some research a couple years ago at this point with the Sales Management Association, a great organization. We're trying to understand exactly how people are using their sales pipelines and share a lot of data from this research. And one of the things we asked was simply, as an organization, what's the expectation for how often your sales managers, your frontline sales managers, are going to be meeting with your sales people to review the sales pipeline, have a pipeline management discussion. And as you can see, and I think this will be familiar, 72% of the respondents said that at least once more than once a month. The most predominant thing was 51% said weekly, having conversations about the sales pipeline. Right? How many people, the sales managers and salespeople, sit down weekly or so to have a conversation about the sales pipeline? Right? We also found that the average meeting was 53 minutes in duration. So if you think about this, if you're a sales manager, you have 10 sales reps reporting to you. You're meeting with each of them once a week for 53 minutes. You're spending 8, 9, 10 hours a week just having conversations about the sales pipeline. And that's why I say with confidence that the sales pipeline is actually, unknown to many organizations, the biggest investment that organization is making in sales performance. I mean, if you look at how much time is being committed to it, it is alarming. And it's a good investment of their time. We looked at companies that said they were ineffective at pipeline management versus companies that said they were effective at pipeline management. And the companies that were managing their pipelines effectively had revenue growing at 15% faster rate year over year than companies that were ineffective at doing this task. So we're spending a lot of time on it. If we're doing it well, it really matters. The bad news is not a lot of us do it well. We asked them, we said, do you think you're ineffective or effective at managing the pipeline? I just shared those. 13% couldn't make up their mind. Right? This is like if you ask your wife, honey, do you still love me like you used to? And she says, well, it's complicated. Right? That's a no. So we're going to go ahead and say that 44% were confident they were doing this, 56% were confident they were not doing this well. So how is it that we can be doing something so much, right, investing so much energy into it, we know it's important, and we still do it badly? Let me just show you a video here. It's an animation of what we see in many pipeline review sessions. I'm sure this might look familiar to many of you as well. Cue music.
Hi, Jane. I ran some sales reports this morning that I'd like to discuss with you. It looks like you made a lot of sales calls last week. Suspiciously, it was the exact number you are required to make.
Yes. I spent Friday afternoon making up pretend sales calls to put into CRM so those numbers would look good.
Awesome. However, it looks like your sales pipeline is too small, and you're going to miss your revenue target for the quarter. I really need you to make your quota.
This should be kind of obvious, Bob, but if I knew what I needed to do to make my quota, I would already be doing it. Rather than just telling me to make my quota, perhaps you could coach me so I become a better salesperson.
I'd love to coach you, Jane, but I'm way too busy tracking your sales calls and telling you to make your quota. So please make more sales calls, grow your pipeline, and, above all, make your quota.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Jane.
So I got a little bit of nervous laughter there. I'm suspecting that you identify with this conversation. Right? We've seen this conversation before in many of our sales forces. And I've thought a lot about this. So again, why is this? Why is it that we have a function, pipeline management, that's consuming so much time, and the people are really genuinely trying to do it well, and we end up with conversations like Bob and Jane just had right there. Hey, Jane, I need you to grow your pipeline and make your quota. Well, stay with me for a second. I'm going to make a comparison you might not have heard before, and if it doesn't go well, I may never make it again. When I was in college, I was an economics major. I was almost a double major in philosophy. I was just too afraid that the philosophers would find out that the economists were hanging out in the same room. But I was fascinated by the ancient Greek philosophers. Let me explain to you why. We got some stuff going on here. Fascinated by the ancient Greek philosophers. So this is 400 years BC. We're talking about Aristotle, Socrates, these folks, right? Long time ago, 2,000 years, 2,500 years. At that time, there was really no discipline, right? There was no mathematics, no science. The scientific method didn't exist. This is 2,000 years before the telescope and the microscope would be invented. And these philosophers were trying to make sense of very fundamental things, right? What is the world? Where are we? What is that? And these are the smartest, most educated people on the planet trying to figure out very fundamental things, and they had to rely on common sense. Consequently, they got things really, really wrong. Like wrong to the point that it's funny. Now, let me just share with you a couple of examples. Socrates famously, as you might know, said that everything revolves around the Earth. Right? The Earth is the center of the universe. Now, remember, 2,000 years from a telescope, no idea. It made total sense, right? Standing on the Earth, in the morning, the sun comes up, goes over there, goes down. Then the stars come up, come over here, go down. Didn't feel the Earth moving. It made total sense to think that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything rotated around it. In the absence of any more discipline, any more scientific method, any more studies, it made total sense. One of my other favorites is Anaximenes. So this young gentleman was convinced that everything was made of air. And cold air was hard. And hot air was rarefied. Right? So you stand by a fire, it's hot, it's very rare. You put your hand on a rock, it's very cold. And one of my favorite tests is if you hold your mouth wide open and breathe on your hand, hot air, right? Hot diffuse air. But if you purse your lips and blow, ooh, hard, cold air. These were the smartest, most educated men on the planet Earth at this time, and this is what they came up with because they were using nothing more than common sense. People fundamentally trying to understand very important things who didn't have the discipline, didn't have the methodology around it to make sense. I would contend this is where sales management is today. I said they're the smartest people on the planet. I don't understand why you're laughing. But if you think about it, sales managers, smart people trying really hard to do the fundamentally right things, right? They want to make their quota, they want their salespeople to make their quota. There's no education in sales management. There's no degree in sales management you get when you go to university. And consequently, sales management has been relegated to date to using common sense as a guide to do things like manage the sales pipeline. So if we're using common sense, the interesting thing is we make what seem like good decisions but get things wrong. So what would common sense tell us about the sales pipeline? Well, what I'm going to share with you is 5 myths about pipeline management that make total sense when observed from a common sense perspective, but when you apply a little bit of mathematics, a little bit of research, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of science, you'll discover these aren't actually the smartest ways to approach pipeline management as a task. So first let me just take literally 90 seconds to talk to you about our company, Vantage Point, and why we care about these things. We're a training company at our core. We train sales managers. So imagine all the sales training companies you know, imagine all of those that train sales managers, we're it. And consequently, we focus on things, as I mentioned, like pipeline management, forecasting, coaching, CRM, how to use data to manage and coach better. And it's an interesting, neglected, but very, very interesting part of the sales force. We are committed to research. As I said, I'm going to share with you a lot of research because we think that selling today isn't like selling was 15 years ago. Therefore, sales management can't be like sales management was 15 years ago. However, in the absence of any new information, our sales managers are managing their salespeople the way their managers manage them. And so we think that only by doing research and understanding what are true best practices can we make progress in this discipline. I'll also say that we're very focused on execution. Right? We don't do a lot of leadership type training or very generic coaching. We're very specifically, these are some of our programs, we're very specifically focused on things like coaching the sales pipeline, forecasting, again, using CRM data. And I'll share with you that we have a pretty good track record, almost perfect actually, of demonstrating really solid ROI with the things that we do, which is kind of interesting if you think about this. We get sales teams to sell more stuff without training any sales people. Right? All of these results were brought through increasing sales management's capability by introducing some discipline and rigor. And the final thing I'll share with you, actually there are 2 things here. So these are clients of ours. The first thing you'll note is that we only work with companies with blue or red logos. So if you too have a blue or red logo, maybe next year at Dreamforce we can slot you in up here. But the more important thing is that we work with a lot of companies that have invested a lot of time and money and energy into getting their sales forces running well, and they gravitate toward the message that we have. So we're actually rather proud of this slide of logos for very selfish but meaningful reasons. So let's go back to this. What does common sense tell us about the sales pipeline? So I'm going to, again, share with you 5 common myths, I'll call them, about sales pipeline management. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of math, a little bit of science, a little bit of research, a little bit of rigor, and see if we can spoil these myths once and for all and send you back to your sales forces enlightened. Oh, here we go. This is the best. All right, let's just start with an easy one. Bigger is better. How many people, and I've set the stage for you to not respond the way I want you to respond, right? Okay, I get that. How many people think within your organizations there's a general consensus that a bigger pipeline is a better sales pipeline? Okay, the rest of you, I know it's kind of still got to gear up. We'll get those hands up. So I fly out of a little airport in Charlottesville, Virginia. If anybody knows Charlottesville, Virginia. We have 3 gates, one for each airline. You can see the entire departure list for the day on one long screen. Right? There are words never spoken in an airplane at Charlottesville. We're number 2 for departure. Never spoken. Words I've never heard spoken in a sales force ever. Jason, your pipeline is way too big. Way too big. We got to get this pipeline down in size. It is too much to bear, unbearably large. There's this common sense mentality that bigger is better. I'll share with you an example. Here's a story from some work we did with GE several years ago, and this was really changed my thinking and kind of put me in tune with this idea of bigger may not be better. So what you have up here are representations of sales pipelines, obviously. So in this group we were working with, there are 125 sales managers. If you looked at their salespeople, on average, their salespeople had $41 million sales pipelines. Right? They sold big, expensive things. And there was one sales manager, let's call him Diego, because his name's actually Diego. Great name, Diego. So Diego, everyone said was the best, he's rock star sales manager. People said if we had more Diegos in our organization, we would run circles around the world. We were looking at some pipeline management stuff, and we observed this. So Diego's pipeline was a full 25% smaller on average than his peers' salespeople's pipelines. So anyone looking at this would reach the obvious conclusion, Diego, man, you got to pick up your game here, right? I know you're doing great, but if you could just get a pipeline as big as everyone else, we could sell more stuff. But then we looked at how much his team was actually selling. And with pipelines that were 25% smaller, his team had sold year to date, when we did this analysis, 50% more stuff from 25% smaller sales pipelines. And when we looked at the percentage of deals that were being forecasted to close and the percentage of revenue that was being forecasted to close based on the qualified opportunities, he was also crushing the rest of the organization. And I'll share with you in a minute more what was going on with Diego, but it really opened my eyes anyway to the fact that if we can suspend disbelief, we can do more with smaller sales pipelines. But it does require a suspension of disbelief. So the question is, how big's enough? So most companies we know work with some kind of rule of thumb, whether it's a coverage ratio, which is something I only heard in the last few years. How many people in your organization have some sense of the sales pipeline needs to be 4 times target, 5 times target, 2.5 times target? Right? Okay, well, you're on the path to enlightenment. You've moved past bigger is better. We've gotten to the point of actually trying to quantify what might be the ideal size pipeline. The reality of it is, it depends. So we've spent a lot of time trying to get underneath this bigger is better, and then underneath that, 3x, 2x, 5x. We've tried to understand how we can do 2 things. First of all, how can we take this pipeline sizing exercise down to an individual salesperson level? And how can we make it so simple the conversation could take place on the back of an envelope or a cocktail napkin, as the case may be? And it's not to simplify it because sales managers and salespeople aren't smart. It's to simplify it, and actually salespeople, as a rule, are far more educated than the general population. The reason to simplify it is because salespeople and sales managers don't have time. They don't have time for complex analytics. They don't have time to deal with it. Conversation between a manager and a rep has to be simple. And so we've tried to boil this down as much as possible. And what we came up with is with 2 pieces of information, we can have a very constructive conversation. One is the sales rep's quota, and the second is the sales rep's deal win rate. Right? With these two pieces of information, we can blow past this bigger is better, 3x, 2x kind of jargon, and get to useful coaching and useful management. And many of you, being analytic people, probably already reached this conclusion, right? We take the salesperson's quota and we divide it by their win rate. And that yields the ideal size pipeline for an individual salesperson. And win rate doesn't have to be very complex. We literally say, look, just take your sales for the past 12 months, divide it by what you think the average size of your sales pipeline was for the last 12 months. Let's just call that your win rate. Worked with a sales operations group one time. They said they had spent 3 months trying to calculate the win rate for their sales force. There's an easier way, and it's useful. So let me give you an example. So if I'm a sales rep and I have a $1 million quota, and I'm a good sales rep, and I'm closing 50% of my stuff every year, simple math would say I need $2 million in my pipeline. Ain't that hard. But what about Jane? So let's say Jane, Bob and Jane, right, going back, let's say Jane is not as experienced a sales rep as I am. She only closes 25% of her stuff. Same quota, $1 million. Jane may need a $4 million sales pipeline to get where she needs to go. The thing that's interesting here is that if I'm at an organization, if I have an organization view, if I'm looking organization-wide, I might do this number and go, hey, our whole sales force needs to have 3x in their pipeline. Right? Because I'm looking across the entire organization, and we go through life telling Jane she needs 3 times her quota in her pipeline. Jane doesn't make quota. Jane is frustrated. Jane quits. Jane's talented and goes to your competition. Jane kicks your ass. It's just simple things like this. It doesn't take a lot. So first myth, bigger is better. Right-sized is best. This next one's good too. I can't even wait to show you guys this next one. Pipelines are for forecasting. That's why we have pipelines. Who in the audience will confess the primary reason you even have a sales pipeline in your organization is so you can create a forecast? Fess up, come on. All right, you're losing a little credibility with me. I thought we were off to a good start first time around. Now it's getting a little shaky, a little wobbly. So the rest of you are probably shy, or maybe you don't understand the question. And I don't say that in a disparaging way. It is so difficult to separate pipeline management from forecasting. It is incredibly difficult. And the reason is it happens at the same conversation, right? We have a pipeline review session. Out of that comes a forecast. We have 2 programs, as I showed you, that touch this. We have a pipeline management program and a forecasting program, and we spend most of the time at the beginning of each trying to pull them apart. And in this research we did, again, referencing back to the Sales Management Association, we asked people, we said, okay, we're studying sales pipelines, right? What are the most important purposes of the pipeline in your organization? No surprise. Number 1 reason sales organizations have sales pipelines is to forecast. Right? On a scale of 1 to 7, this is the 6th most important. The others are kind of interesting, though. Judge rep performance, review rep activities, help close deals, identify process bottlenecks, identify skill deficits. So the number 1 most important thing, important quotes, is forecasting. But if you look at these, one of these doesn't look just like the other. Right? If you look at the other things that people are using the sales pipeline for, judging rep performance, reviewing their activities, right? This is what sales reps are doing. This is what they're working on, pipelines, individual activities, helping them close deals. This is important stuff. Right? The stuff to the right here is the important stuff. When you pull apart pipeline management and forecasting, things tend to get better. We would say that pipeline management is about improving performance today. Forecasting is about predicting the future. Both important, but 2 very different activities. If I had to give you an analogy, pipeline management is like guiding the ship. Right? How are my sales reps doing? How is my team doing? Do I have a healthy sales pipeline? Which reps need my attention? Where do they need attention? Where are the deals getting stuck? How can I move the deals along? How can I come in and help my sales reps get to their quota? And then there's forecasting, which is just, when do we arrive? What's the arrival time again? They're both important, but I would argue they're not both equally important. I would say forecast as quickly as possible and get out of it so you can get onto your pipeline management stuff. And let me share some data here. This is from a separate piece of research that we did last year. One of my partners, Michelle Vazana, actually did it. And we said, how much time do you spend every month forecasting? We have sales managers. On the bottom is 0 to 4 hours, 5 to 8 hours, 9 to 6, and over 17 hours a month forecasting, right? Imagine a sales manager spending 20 hours a month doing nothing but forecasting. On the y-axis is the number of their sales reps that made quota. You don't have to be a statistics major to know there's not a strong correlation between the amount of forecasting taking place and the performance of the sales team. We also asked them, how much time do you spend with each rep individually discussing opportunities, discussing deals in the sales pipeline? The blue is the coaching conversations. So again, I like to draw stark extremes because it makes it easier to get you to the middle. The main reason we have pipelines is to do forecasts. The most important thing we can do with a pipeline is not forecasting. The most important thing is to use it to improve sales performance. Myth, pipelines are for forecasting. Pipelines are for coaching. They're the most important coaching tool you have at your disposal in a sales force, and we're using them to forecast. Bad plan. Off to a bad start. All right, one more, and then two more. Just go all day. Manager is the closer. How many people already know what I'm going to talk about here? Manager is the closer in the pipeline. So here's the career path for sales managers. You start out, you're a salesperson. You prove that you're a great salesperson. Congratulations, you get promoted to be a sales manager. You're ignored. You become an average sales manager. You wish you could be a superstar salesperson once again. The sales managers in your organization were your best salespeople, or someone else's best salespeople that you hired away, though our research shows that 71% of sales managers are internal promotions, not external hires. So most of these people were your best salespeople. When a sales manager looks at a sales pipeline, this is what he or she sees. It's just a very generic sales pipeline with some definitions, right? We prospect, we qualify some opportunities, we create a solution, we submit a proposal, and then we close it, right? We win or we lose. This is just a very standard kind of sales process. When a sales manager looks at this, and it's Wednesday afternoon, where am I going to spend my time? They like late-stage intervention for a number of reasons. First of all, it's fun, right? Those deals are just about to close. We're going to win them or we're going to lose them. I can swoop in and be the super salesperson and save the day, right? I'm the closer. And that's cynical, of course, but accurate. There's something much more practical, though. You know, by the time a deal gets to the end of the sales pipeline, you're staring it right in the face. Right? There's a $500,000 deal right there. Someone's going to win it. We're going to win it, or the competition's going to win it. It's already been forecast. Senior leadership knows that $500,000 is just sitting there, and if we lose it, it's going to be highly visible to the senior executive team we lost that deal. So for both practical and impractical purposes, sales managers gravitate toward intervention late in the sales cycle. Our research, and I'll share with you in a second, will tell you that coaching has a higher impact early in the sales cycle than it does later in the sales cycle. Because early in the sales cycle, you can do a couple things. You can disqualify bad opportunities. You can help the salesperson influence the customer's thinking about their problem and their decision-making criteria and how they're assessing the solutions. By the time it gets to the end, and we do the same thing, right? When we have a big deal that we propose to a client or a prospect, and you know, it's days away from finding out, we're doing this with our hands, right? We're doing the same thing anyone would. Like, is there anything we can do to make sure we get this? Is there anything we can do to pull it across the line a little sooner? No, the decision's been made weeks ago. They just haven't told us. Early intervention is where it's at. Let me go back to Diego for a second. So as you recall, Diego, 25% smaller pipeline, 50% more production, better forecasting, the whole thing. Everything was better with Diego. We also noticed something else interesting. His team was doing much more prospecting. So we looked at the number of prospecting meetings his team had scheduled with prospects during the quarter, and his team was actually doing 50% more prospecting, had 25% smaller pipeline, and was closing 50% more business. We studied Diego hard. We didn't find, in our opinion, he was smarter, more motivated. I mean, he'd had the same training courses everyone else had had. Right? His sales reps didn't seem to have better territories. Nothing seemed remarkable about Diego. Diego, you're not here, are you, by chance? I already insulted all the sales managers, comparing them to, you know. He had a pipeline meeting as everyone else did on Friday afternoon. to update the forecast, right? Forecast had to be done by Monday morning, Friday afternoon, pipeline review meeting, right, whatever. What Diego did that was interesting is Monday morning, he had what he called a lead review session or something. But basically he had a separate meeting where he got together with his salespeople to just talk about newly identified opportunities. And I've never seen anything like it. Diego was like a goalie on an ice hockey team sitting in front of his pipeline. He's like, no, 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 no. Literally, tell me about this new opportunity. Well, it looks like a pretty good one. Do we know the buyer? We kind of know him. Have we sold anything to them in the past? No. Is there a competitor in there? Is there an incumbent? Yeah, don't put that in my sales pipeline. Literally do not put that in my sales pipeline until you know more about it. Most sales managers are come one, come all. Bring them on in. Bigger pipeline's better. All he did was coach early in the sales process to help disqualify bad opportunities and then to try to coach the good opportunities through. That's why they had time to do more prospecting. That's why they had time to focus on the good deals. That's why they had much more efficient sales pipelines. So we worked with GE at the time to take some of those strategies and put them into, and I just want to share with you, this is remarkable. So pre-training, these are close rates by way of dollars of deals and number of deals. So we put together this training program that basically focused on early stage intervention, right? So some of Diego's stuff, but also just how do you coach early in the sales pipeline? How do you do this differently? Within 6 months, this gets gaudy. Within 18 months, basically the entire team of 125 sales managers had brought themselves up to Diego's level of performance that I shared with you before. Smaller pipelines, more prospecting, more productive pipelines, better forecasting. Everything was better, driven solely by early stage coaching in the sales process. Oh, can I go back? I can go back. So just to put this in a broader context, that was one company, right? That was one division of one very large global company. We also, in our research, asked people, okay, so you have these weekly meetings to discuss opportunities, right? I talked about the research before. We said, what's the primary agenda in that meeting? Is it to discuss early stage opportunities, or is it to discuss terms and conditions and all the other stuff? The sales managers who are more committed to early stage intervention in their sales pipelines had 14% greater performance than their sales reps making quota. Every way we've looked at this, the data looks like this. You can look at it company by company, intervention by intervention. You can look at it as broad market data. The sales manager is not the closer in good organizations. The sales manager is not the closer in world-class organizations. The sales manager is the cleaner. Clean the pipeline. Keep the bad stuff out, get the good stuff in, and spend all your time trying to win the good stuff. By the time you get to the end of the sales process, decision's been made, you just haven't been told. Okay, now we're getting on a little testy water here. If someone snags me off the stage from Salesforce and kicks me out of the, I'll meet you guys in the bar. I think we'll probably all fit in the bar here at the Marriott. We'll carry on this conversation. But when people have trouble with their sales pipelines, they make a beeline to technology, right? Pipeline's out of control. Pipeline's not worth doing. We need to implement CRM or implement a new CRM, update CRM, implement a new tool. So we've also done stuff, so I've been bashing forecasting for a minute, and it sounds like I'm bashing technology, but I'm not. Let me just put these together for a second. We looked at what leads to more accurate forecasts. We've done other research on forecasting. The number one predictor of accurate forecast is that it's technology enabled. Right? If you want more accurate forecast, run, don't walk to CRM. Polish up your Salesforce.com instances and start producing better. Number one determinant of increased forecast accuracy. When we looked at the determinants of increased pipeline productivity, it was not the case. When we looked at determinants of increased pipeline productivity judged by year-over-year revenue growth, as I told you before, the number one thing by far was companies had a well-defined sales process. Process. One of the most boring terms in any sale. You can't, it used to be 20 years ago, if you started talking about sales process at a holiday party, you get kicked out. Right? No one wanted to talk about sales process until CRM came along and started automating sales processes. Now it's a great word to discuss. And as far as pipeline management goes, it's the most productive thing you can have, a well-defined sales process. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a well-defined sales process? So here's a standard process. Right? You generate a lead, you take it through some number of stages, and then at the end you win it, you lose it, or increasingly no one wins it. Right? It just kind of is out there, other. Right? But regardless, you don't log the revenue. When you look at this and you think about the task of pipeline management, right? Think about this. You're trying to identify where deals are getting stuck. You're trying to identify where deals are falling out. You're trying to identify where sales reps you're trying to identify what it is sales reps are doing. Where can you intervene? Where can you help? If you don't have this defined well, how can you do any of those things? How can you, possibly? Right? If these are mushy stages that aren't very well defined and stuff just kind of goes wherever, how can you expect to manage a sales pipeline effectively? How can you expect to forecast, right? It goes hand in hand. Let me just share with you a few things we think define a good sales process as thought for you. And I think they'll make total sense. First of all, the sales process should marry perfectly with your customer's buying process. Ideally, the selling process should be a mirror reflection of the buying process. We get so obsessed with sales activities in our sales forces, we forget there are buyers out there. Because while we're out here doing stuff like prospecting and qualifying and influencing criteria, you know, the buyers out there identifying their needs. They're out there establishing criteria. They're out there assessing their solutions. They've made a soft decision, but they haven't quite committed. They're trying to mitigate the risk. Is this really going to do what they say it's going to do? Can I really afford this? Is my career on the line if this goes south? And then they make a decision. And when your sales process is married perfectly with the buying process, good things happen. Right? You can have confidence that you can coach. You can have confidence you understand where things actually are. I had a client one time in Dallas, Texas. We'll call him Brett, because his name is actually Brett. Interesting guy, Brett. He sold real estate, commercial real estate. And he told me one time, he said, Jason, I don't even bother to train my salespeople how to sell. He said, I train my salespeople how our customers buy. And if my salespeople understand how customers buy, they're smart enough to figure out the selling part. He didn't even have a sales process in his CRM tool. He had a buying process. Here's what the buyer's doing. Oh, here's what the buyer's doing now. Oh, here's what the buyer's doing now. And it underscored the idea that a salesperson's task is really to do nothing more than hold the buyer's hand through the process. Hey, come along. Come along, it's going to be great. Yeah, come. Sales is not that hard. You're just shepherding buyers through their process. But if you don't acknowledge the buying process and you obsess over the selling process, you have a bad sales process. Here's another one I like to think of. These stages should represent incremental commitment from a buyer. Right, so here's some examples. That sounds very interesting, seller. Yes, I'd like to hear more. They've committed some time. That sounds so interesting. I'd be willing to share some more information with you. Here's what we're trying to solve. Here are some of our specs and technical requirements. That sounds so interesting. I'd like to introduce you to some other people inside our organization. Right? Now they're putting skin in the game. We'll put you on the short list. Hey, I like this. Let's negotiate and see if we can get to a conclusion. Hey, yeah, this is great. Let's party, man. Let's party. If your milestones don't represent incremental commitments from the buyer, so what? Right? How can you know why the deals are getting stuck? How can you and forecasting okay. How many people in your sales process, in your pipeline, have a stage that has the word proposal in it? Okay. How much effort does it take for a buyer to receive your proposal? Oh, you want to give me a proposal? Hell yeah! Will your competitors do that too? That sounds great. I'd love to learn. Talking about forecasting one time, and someone says, so this guy said, yeah, when we submit a proposal, we move it in our forecast from 50 to 75% likelihood. I said, you close 75% of your proposals? He said, hell no, we only close like 20%. Your forecasting is not very good, is it? You can't make this stuff up. And the last one I'll share with you is that what we did see also in pipeline management and forecasting was clear definitions of what goes in each stage. If you want an interesting and demoralizing exercise, go get 10 sales reps, put them in separate rooms, and ask them to write down what qualifies a good opportunity. You'd be surprised. After it's big, it's going to get pretty fuzzy. If you haven't defined what goes in these stages, you're off to a bad start. And when we put together this pipeline management program, I was pretty convinced, and I was pretty proud of it, that people were going to gravitate toward the analytic stuff. right? So let's teach our sales managers how big a pipeline should be and how to identify trouble spots in the sales pipeline to intervene with coaching and how to identify whether the pipeline's mirrored to our go-to-market strategy. And I'm telling you, as the customers came in the door, they had one reason in mind. They wanted to implement a sales pipeline management training program. It was to make a consistent pipeline across their organization. And every single time as the pipeline gets rolled up and it just gets mangled because every region's doing it differently. We can't trust what anyone's putting in it. The stages don't make sense. They don't marry. And what I thought was going to be a huge analytic exercise in success, people just wanted some consistency in pipeline management. And this is at the heart of the problem. Just define the process and tell people what goes in there. Simple, but maybe not easy. Okay, I haven't been kicked out yet. We're all good. Everything's good? Everything's good here. Nothing to see. Move along. CRM is not the solution. CRM is a helper. The sales process is the solution. If you have a good sales process, you can manage your sales pipeline successfully. You can forecast better. If you don't, no amount of technology is going to solve your problems. Okay, the fifth and last myth here that I'm going to share with you. And this one's a little puzzling to me, but I mean, again, I'm admittedly in a unique situation. There's a perception that this stuff is pretty intuitive, right? Pipeline management, it's pretty intuitive, right? People just know how to do that stuff. I got drug into a sales call the other day, and see if this resonates with you as sales enablement, sales operations folks. So it's someone from sales operations that come to us and said, we're really interested in what it is, this pipeline management program that you have. It's really what we need. We need some consistency. We need some more standardization around the way people are treating this, and everyone needs more coaching, blah, blah, blah. So I'd like for you to talk to one of our sales leaders. So now we're on the phone, and the salesperson must have been desperate to drag me into a sales call. So here I am, the salesperson. There's the sales enablement person who had brought us in, thought it was perfect, and then there was a sales leader, one of the regional sales leaders. We go through this whole thing, and the sales leader said something that I didn't understand until I thought about it afterwards. He said, I think this would be pretty interesting for new managers. It's just a little too rudimentary for our existing sales managers. When he hung up the phone, she said, he's just gotten it all wrong. And I thought about this substantially when I was on my lawn tractor mowing the lawn later that day, which is what I do. What he was saying is, our sales managers already do this. He had confused comfort with doing something for confidence and competence in doing something. Right? Just because someone's been doing something for 10 years doesn't mean they've been doing it well. And I think that's the trap we fall into with pipeline management, to some extent forecasting as well. Sales managers have been doing this for a decade. We have some sales managers 20 years been here managing. Okay. So all our salespeople make their quota? Well, there might be an opportunity for improvement. So I'll share some quick insights on this one. I mentioned before, we even admit we're not good at this, right? We think it's intuitive. We think we don't need to train our sales managers and our salespeople on it. We think they've been doing it. They must be good at it. But then again, if people are objective about it, 56% said, no, we're not really that effective at this stuff. And the data bore out that if you're not effective at it, you don't close as much revenue. When we looked at things that impacted sales sales pipeline management productivity, I told you the first thing was having a well-defined formal sales process. The third most important thing was having trained sales managers. Right? And not trained sales managers how to log into the system and create a pipeline report. They know how to do that. Maybe clumsily, but they can get there with time. It was more about, hey, we do have a sales pipeline management methodology. Here's what it is. Here are the stages. Here's what goes in each. Here's how you intervene. Here's when you might want to have conversations with your salespeople about the pipeline. Here's what those agendas for the sales pipeline review might look like. Literally, you can't overemphasize the blocking and tackling that people are missing when it comes to very fundamental things they do every single day. And pipeline management is the centerpiece of all the malbehavior. If you step back and look at it. This also is very interesting. So this is the second most important thing behind having a process. That the sales managers spent more than 3 hours per month with a salesperson going over their sales pipeline. So recall that most people are meeting more than once a week or more for 53 minutes. And so on average, people are spending around 3-4 hours a month with each sales rep. The people who overcommitted to that process of managing the pipeline got better results. And there's something interesting embedded in here. It's not just that they spent more time in it. If you're spending 4 hours or 5 hours a month with a salesperson going through their sales pipeline, you're doing much more than scrubbing data. You're doing much more than updating the forecast. If you're spending that much time, you have to get to the point of discussing the individual opportunities. You have to be saying things to the salesperson like, tell me where we are in this opportunity. Who are the competitors? Why do you think we should win this deal? Why do you think we should compete for this deal? How are we going to position ourselves uniquely? Is there any other resource in the organization that you need so that you can win this deal? Right? If you commit the time and commit good time, you can move the needle. And here's something that marries with that perfectly. People that spent more than 10 minutes discussing each individual deal close more deals. So if you have a 53-minute pipeline review session, what this says is, don't pull out your entire sales pipeline and go through 53 deals 1 minute each, making sure the data is scrubbed just so the forecast is accurate. Maybe you only go through 5 deals in 53 minutes. Maybe you spend 10 minutes at least on each deal really having a conversation. Tell me where we are. How are we going to win this deal? Is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything anyone else can do to help? This is when pipeline management becomes really productive stuff. You don't get that one. So we take this idea of the pipeline management stuff is really intuitive, man. Everybody's doing it. We must be great. It's okay. This would be an interesting thing for young managers to learn, but experienced managers, they got this down. To the fact that, like everything else in your organization, this requires focused development. Right? The fact that you're sitting in this room probably means that you've spent hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on CRM and other technology to enable pipeline management and forecasting. I would ask you how much money you've spent training and developing your sales teams to actually use that technology better. So here we go, big finish. So I got some interesting laughter earlier when I compared sales management to the ancient Greek philosophers. Okay, maybe a stretch. I told you I may never use that again if it didn't go over well. I'm not sure if it went over well or not. I'm really having a hard time gauging. But sales managers to date have been left with common sense, and they've done the best they can. Smart people who want their sales reps to succeed, they want to succeed, they do the best they can, and it leads them to conclusions like a bigger pipeline is better. In the absence of anything else, perhaps it is. Pipelines are for forecasting. That's what senior leadership says we need is forecast. We must use a pipeline for forecasting. Manager's the closer, right? Straight to the end. CRM will solve it. Easy and intuitive. When we do some research, we do some math, we do some science, what we learn is that every salesperson has an ideal pipeline size. And it's not that hard to find. You just have to do it. Pipeline should be used as a coaching tool, not as a forecasting tool. Keep the bad deals out. Don't bring them in. Have a great sales process. This all becomes easier. Train your sellers and train your sales managers, and good things will follow. So I'll leave you with a couple things. First of all, obviously let us know if we can help. I love, love, love this topic. You've stumbled onto something that matters in your sales force. Do it better.